Declan paused in the doorway, a cup of tea in each hand. The flicker caught his attention. Sarah's quick movement as the laptop screen folded down, her smile appearing a beat too late. "Just bringing you some tea," he said, placing her mug on the side table. "Thanks." Sarah's hand remained protectively on the closed laptop. "Just finishing up some work emails." He nodded, noticing how her eyes didn't quite meet his. It wasn't the first time he'd seen this. The subtle shift in her posture when he entered a room, the abrupt closing of screens. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Of course," she replied, her tone casual, but fingers tapping nervously on the laptop's edge. "Why wouldn't it be?" As he left, Declan felt that familiar twinge again, the quiet dissonance between her words and actions that had been growing like a shadow between them. Declan hung his coat in the hallway closet, loosening his tie with a contented sigh. After 12 years of marriage, coming home to Sarah still felt like returning to solid ground. He followed the familiar glow of the laptop screen into their living room, where she sat curled on the sofa, her face illuminated by the blue light. "Hey, you," he called, crossing toward her with a smile. Sarah's head jerked up, fingers moving swiftly across the keyboard before snapping the laptop shut. "Hey, didn't hear you come in." Her smile appeared a beat too late, not quite reaching her eyes. "What are you working on?" Declan asked, bending to kiss her cheek. He caught a whiff of her perfume, the one she usually saved for client meetings. "Just catching up on emails." She shifted the laptop slightly away from him. "How was your day?" Declan settled into the armchair across from her. "The Henderson project is finally approved. Should be smooth sailing from here." He paused, watching her fingers drum lightly on the closed laptop. "Everything okay?" "You seem a bit distracted." "Fine, just tired." Sarah stood, tucking the laptop under her arm. "I'm going to change. Want to order in tonight?" As she disappeared upstairs, Declan noticed the familiar weight of unasked questions settling between his shoulders. The moment had been brief, just a flicker of guardedness, but it left a strange, hollow feeling in its wake. The following Tuesday, Declan brought coffee to Sarah's home office. The door stood slightly ajar, and through the gap he saw her leaning close to the screen, laughing softly. As his knuckles rapped against the wood, her hands moved quickly, and by the time he entered, her expression had reset to neutral. "Thought you might need this," he said, setting the mug beside her. "Thanks." She took a sip, her eyes not meeting his. "Just wrapping up a few things." 3 days later, he found her on her phone in the kitchen, the conversation ending abruptly as he entered. "Who was that?" he asked casually, reaching past her for a glass. "Just Melissa from work," Sarah replied, sliding the phone into her pocket. Team drama. The pattern continued. A Sunday afternoon, when she closed her tablet as he returned from taking out the trash. A Thursday evening, when her phone buzzed repeatedly until she silenced it without explanation. Small moments, easily dismissed individually, yet collectively forming a mosaic of increasing secrecy. Declan began noticing other changes, too. Sarah stayed later at work. Her weekend errands took longer. The easy conversations they once shared became shorter, more perfunctory. "Is everything all right between us?" he finally asked one night as they prepared for bed, separate but parallel, like planets in distant orbits. "Of course," she answered, a practiced response that came too quickly. "Why wouldn't it be? You just seem elsewhere lately." Sarah's expression softened, momentarily genuine. "I've been stressed about work, that's all." She squeezed his hand before turning away. Declan nodded, choosing to believe her even as doubt settled deeper into his bones. Declan arranged the recipe cards on the kitchen counter, checking ingredients against his list. His 45th birthday was in 2 days, and he'd taken the afternoon off to prepare. Their tradition was simple but meaningful: a home-cooked meal, a good bottle of wine, reminiscing about another year together. He marked the calendar hanging on the refrigerator with a small star, smiling at the memories of birthdays past. Last year, Sarah had surprised him with tickets to see his favorite jazz quartet. The year before, they'd taken a weekend trip to the coast. When Sarah came home, he was marinating steaks for Friday's dinner. "Something smells good," she said, setting her purse on the counter. "Just prepping for Friday," Declan replied, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "I found that Cabernet we loved at the vineyard last summer. Thought we could open it with dinner." Sarah's expression shifted, her eyes darting briefly to her phone before meeting his. "About Friday?" She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture he recognized from whenever she delivered unwelcome news. "The girls from work are doing a thing for Jen's promotion. I told them I'd be there." Declan's hands stilled. "Friday night? You know it's my birthday, right?" "Of course I know," she said, her tone carrying a hint of defensiveness. "But this is important for Jen, and it's been planned for weeks. We can celebrate Saturday instead, can't we? It's just 1 day later." "You never mentioned this before," Declan said carefully, measuring his words against his rising disappointment. Sarah shrugged. "I forgot until Melissa texted today to confirm." She approached, placing a hand on his arm. "We'll make Saturday special, I promise." "It's not a big deal to shift it 1 day, right?" The casual dismissal of their tradition stung more than the change of plans. Declan turned back to the counter, adjusting the recipe card for 2 people down to 1. "Sure," he said finally, his voice even, despite the hollow feeling expanding in his chest. "Saturday works too." Sarah smiled, already looking at her phone again. "Great. I'm going to shower before dinner." As she left the kitchen, Declan stared at the calendar, at the small star he'd drawn. Just a day's difference, he told himself. But as he covered the marinating steaks and placed them in the refrigerator, he couldn't shake the feeling that something more significant than a birthday celebration had just been set aside. The dining room table gleamed under the soft light of Declan's carefully arranged candles. He adjusted the place settings one final time. 2 crystal wine glasses, the matching plates they'd received as a wedding gift, cloth napkins folded precisely. The single rose from their garden stood in a slender vase at the center, its deep red petals catching the light. 6:30. He uncorked the Cabernet, letting it breathe while the oven timer counted down. The aroma of herb-crusted lamb filled the room, mingling with roasted potatoes and the freshly baked sourdough cooling on the counter. 7 o'clock. Declan lit the candles, their flames steady and bright. He sat in his usual chair, glancing occasionally at Sarah's empty place across from him. 7:30. He checked his phone. No messages. The lamb was ready, perfectly medium rare, as she preferred. He served himself, the sound of his knife against the plate unnaturally loud in the quiet house. The clock on the wall ticked steadily. Each bite tasted like duty rather than celebration. Outside, darkness settled over the neighborhood as families gathered around their own tables, together. 8:15. The candles had burned lower, wax pooling at their bases. Declan poured himself another glass of wine, his gaze drifting to the framed photo on the sideboard. Sarah and him on their 10th anniversary trip, her head resting against his shoulder, both smiling at something now forgotten. He tried to rationalize her absence. Work was important to her. Jen's promotion was significant. Saturday would be fine, too. Yet beneath these thoughts ran a deeper current of recognition. Something had shifted between them. Something fundamental. The empty chair across from him wasn't just an absence. It was a statement. 9 o'clock. The food had cooled. The candles burned low. Declan sat alone on his 45th birthday, the celebration he'd planned reduced to a solitary vigil. The front door opened at 11:42 p.m. Declan had moved to the living room, a book open but unread in his lap. The dining room remained as it was, evidence of the evening that hadn't happened. Sarah's laughter preceded her, floating in from the entryway as she fumbled with her keys. When she appeared in the doorway, her cheeks were flushed, hair slightly disheveled, eyes bright with an evening's enjoyment. "You're still up," she said, dropping her purse on the side table. Her voice carried the slight lilt that came with a few glasses of wine. "It's my birthday." Declan kept his tone even, watching her reaction. "Right." She nodded, slipping off her heels. "Happy birthday. Did you do anything nice for yourself?" The casualness of the question struck him like a physical blow. "I made dinner. For us." Sarah glanced toward the dining room, seeming to notice the candles and settings for the first time. "Oh, I thought we were celebrating tomorrow." "Tomorrow is the alternative. Today is my actual birthday." She sighed, leaning against the doorframe. "Don't make this a thing, Declan. I told you I had plans." "After I told you about mine." He set his book aside. "You didn't call, not even a text. It was loud there. I lost track of time." She crossed to the liquor cabinet, pouring herself water. "Jen got promoted to senior director. It's a big deal." "And my birthday isn't?" "That's not what I said." Her tone sharpened. "Why are you trying to make me feel guilty? We'll celebrate tomorrow." "This isn't about the celebration," Declan said quietly. "It's about priorities." Sarah rolled her eyes. "One night, Declan. It's not the end of the world. It's not just tonight. It's becoming a pattern." "What pattern?" She set her glass down harder than necessary. "I'm tired. Can we not do this now?" Declan looked at her, really looked, trying to find the woman who once would have never missed his birthday. Her eyes slid away from his. "Fine," he said finally. "Tomorrow." Sarah nodded, visibly relieved to escape the conversation. "I'm going to shower." As she left, Declan remained seated, the gulf between them widening with each step she took up the stairs. Morning light streamed through the kitchen windows as Declan prepared coffee. He'd slept poorly, the conversation with Sarah, or lack thereof, replaying in his mind. Now he moved through the familiar routine, reaching for mugs, measuring grounds, his actions automatic, while his thoughts churned. Sarah appeared in fresh weekend clothes, hair damp from the shower. Her smile was bright, too bright, like a lamp turned up to disguise shadows. "Morning," she said, reaching for the mug he offered. "Smells good." "Thanks." He leaned against the counter, watching her over the rim of his own cup. Sarah busied herself with toast, her movements deliberately casual. "So, I was thinking for tonight, we could try that new place on Elm Street, the one with the rooftop dining." "That would be nice," Declan replied, his voice carefully neutral. "Great." She spread jam with focused attention. "I made a reservation for 7, and I got you something. It's not much, but—" She disappeared briefly, returning with a small wrapped package. Declan accepted it, fingers working methodically at the paper to reveal a leather wallet. "Your old one was falling apart," she explained. "This one has those special pockets you like." "Thank you," he said, genuine appreciation mixing with the lingering hurt. "It's perfect." A moment of awkward silence stretched between them. Sarah broke it first. About last night. It's okay, Declan interrupted, not wanting to reopen the wound. No, I should have called. I'm sorry. The apology came easily, practiced. Things got hectic, and then Melissa insisted on another round of drinks, and before I knew it, Declan nodded, accepting the explanation without fully believing it. The surface apology, without deeper acknowledgement, was becoming familiar territory. By the way, Sarah said, reaching for her phone, her voice brightening with obvious relief at changing subjects. Did I tell you about the company barbecue next weekend? Everyone's bringing spouses. You didn't mention it. He rinsed his mug at the sink, back turned to her. Well, it should be fun. A chance for you to meet everyone. She touched his shoulder briefly. I need to run some errands before tonight. We're good, right? Declan turned, offering a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. We're good. As Sarah grabbed her purse and keys, the normality of the morning routine settled around them like a comfortable but slightly ill-fitting garment. The issue hadn't been resolved, merely papered over with plans and promises, leaving Declan with the unsettling certainty that they were merely postponing an inevitable reckoning. See you at 6:30, she called as the door closed behind her. See you then, he answered to the empty room. The weekend of the company barbecue arrived with perfect weather, clear skies, and a gentle breeze that carried the scent of charcoal and flowering jasmine across the executive director's sprawling backyard. Declan adjusted his sunglasses as he and Sarah walked up the stone path, her hand resting lightly in the crook of his elbow. That must be Melissa by the grill, Sarah said, nodding toward a tall woman in a floral dress. And there's Jen, the one who got the promotion. Declan smiled, genuinely pleased to be included. Since their makeshift birthday celebration the previous weekend, a pleasant, if somewhat reserved dinner, things had felt marginally better between them. This outing seemed like an opportunity to reconnect in a different context. The famous Declan. A bearded man approached, hand extended. I'm Marcus, head of Sarah's department. She mentions you all the time. All good things, I hope, Declan replied, shaking his hand. The best, Marcus assured him, clapping Sarah on the shoulder. This one's always showing us your anniversary photos. Come on, drinks are by the pool. As they moved through the gathering, Sarah's demeanor shifted subtly. Her smile brightened, her laugh came more easily, her gestures became more animated. She introduced Declan warmly to colleagues, her hand occasionally finding his shoulder or back, touches that had become rare at home. Your wife is a superstar, a woman named Dana told him as Sarah went to fetch them drinks. That Robertson account, total disaster until she stepped in. She's always been brilliant, Declan agreed, watching Sarah chat animatedly with a group by the bar. For a moment, he glimpsed the woman he'd fallen in love with, confident, engaged, radiant. When she returned with their drinks, her fingers brushed his as she handed him the glass. Having fun? She asked. I am, he answered truthfully. And for the first time in weeks, he felt the knot in his chest begin to loosen. The conversation flowed easily among the small group gathered around the patio table. Declan found himself genuinely enjoying the company of Sarah's colleagues as they discussed everything from office politics to the latest streaming shows. Declan works in architectural restoration, Sarah mentioned as the topic turned to careers. Historic buildings, preservation projects, that sort of thing. That sounds fascinating, Jen said. Any buildings we might recognize? The Hartman Theater downtown, Declan replied. We just finished the interior restoration last month. It's been a 2-year project. Oh, I love that place, Dana exclaimed. Those ceiling murals are incredible. Declan's team did those, Sarah added, her hand briefly touching his arm. Marcus leaned forward. So what's the most challenging part of restoration work? Balancing historical accuracy with modern building codes, Declan began, warming to the subject. For instance, on the Hartman project— "Oh God," Sarah interrupted with a laugh. "Don't get him started on building codes. He'll talk your ear off for hours." A brief, awkward silence fell over the table. "Actually, I'd like to hear about it," Jen said, glancing between them. "Trust me," Sarah continued, her tone light but dismissive. "It's mind-numbing stuff. Declan lives for the details that would put the rest of us to sleep." She turned to Marcus. "Remember that presentation you gave last quarter that nearly killed us all? It's like that, but with more dust and old paint." Laughter rippled through the group, though several colleagues shifted uncomfortably. "Sarah," Dana said, with forced brightness, "didn't you mention Declan worked on that museum renovation that won an award?" "Did he?" Sarah replied, raising her eyebrows as if this were news to her. "He's always working on something, but I can never keep track. It all sounds the same after a while." Declan felt heat rise in his face, the casual dismissal landing like a slap. He took a deliberate sip of his drink, maintaining his composure as the conversation awkwardly moved to other topics. Across the table, Jen caught his eye briefly, her expression conveying a silent apology for something that wasn't her fault. Declan nodded slightly in acknowledgement, the exchange unnoticed by Sarah, who was already deep in conversation with Marcus about an upcoming project presentation. As afternoon mellowed toward evening, Declan found himself standing near the koi pond, watching colorful fish dart beneath lily pads. The social dynamics had shifted after the uncomfortable exchange at the table. Several of Sarah's colleagues had made particular efforts to engage him in conversation, a kindness he appreciated, but which only highlighted his growing sense of isolation. From his vantage point, he could see Sarah across the yard, now in a cluster of colleagues near the outdoor bar. Even at this distance, he noticed the pattern. Every few minutes, her attention would drop to her phone, thumbs moving rapidly across the screen. A quick glance, a slight smile, then back to the conversation. Declan accepted a refill from a passing server, nodding his thanks while continuing his quiet observation. 3 times now, Sarah had stepped slightly away from her group to type longer messages, her body angled for privacy. Each time, she'd return to the conversation with renewed animation, as if energized by whatever exchange was happening on her screen. "Your wife is quite the social butterfly," commented an older man who'd introduced himself earlier as the company's CFO. He had joined Declan by the pond, seeming equally content to observe rather than participate. "She's always thrived in group settings," Declan replied diplomatically. "Though perhaps less on her phone," the man noted with the frankness of someone near retirement age. "The younger generation seems physically incapable of putting those things down. My wife has threatened to throw mine in this very pond on multiple occasions." Declan smiled politely, but his attention remained on Sarah, who had now moved to a more secluded corner of the yard, phone held close to her face, shoulders slightly hunched, the universal posture of someone trying to maintain privacy in a public space. When she rejoined the main group minutes later, her cheeks appeared flushed, her movements more animated than before. She caught Declan watching her and raised her hand in a small wave, which he returned automatically. As the party began winding down, guests starting to gather belongings and say goodbyes, Sarah approached him with a practiced smile. "I need to stay a bit longer," she said, her voice casual, but her eyes not quite meeting his. "Marcus wants to discuss the Westfield presentation, and a few of us might grab dinner after. Do you mind taking an Uber home?" "When will you be back?" Declan asked, already knowing the answer wouldn't satisfy. "Not sure," she replied, glancing at her phone as it buzzed in her hand. "Don't wait up." "I still don't understand why you're not upset," Jen said, handing Declan a glass of red wine before settling into the armchair opposite him. Sarah's younger sister had always been the more direct of the two, straightforward where Sarah was diplomatic, candid where Sarah was strategic. "I didn't say I wasn't upset," Declan replied, swirling the wine gently. "I said I'm trying to be reasonable." Jin's living room was a reflection of her personality, eclectic and warm, with mismatched furniture that somehow worked together. On the mantel, family photos tracked the years. Sarah and Jin as children, their parents' anniversary, the three of them at Jin's college graduation. In every image, Sarah stood slightly apart, her smile perfect, but somehow contained. "There's reasonable, and then there's being a doormat," Jin said. "She left you at a party where you knew no one, with no way home, to have dinner with colleagues? After that comment about your work?" Declan sighed. "It wasn't quite that dramatic. You called an Uber and came straight here instead of going home. That says plenty." He couldn't argue with that logic. When the rideshare app had asked for his destination, Jin's address had appeared in his fingers before his conscious mind had made the decision. "Sarah's been different lately," he admitted. "Distant. Preoccupied." "Since when?" Jin leaned forward. "A few months, I guess. Started with little things. Closing her laptop when I'd walk in, staying late at work, being vague about plans." Jin's expression shifted from irritation to concern. "Have you asked her directly what's going on?" "Several times. She always has a reasonable explanation. Work stress, team projects, client demands." "And you believe her?" Declan stared into his wine. "I want to." Jin reached across and squeezed his hand. "You're staying here tonight. The guest room's already made up." "I should probably—" "Declan," she interrupted firmly. "When was the last time you put yourself first? Just stay. We'll watch that awful sci-fi show you love and order too much pizza." For the first time that day, Declan felt his shoulders relax. "Only if you let me by." "Deal," Jin said, reaching for her phone. "But I'm picking the toppings." The digital clock on the nightstand read 3:07 a.m. when Declan's phone vibrated against the wood surface. He blinked awake, disoriented momentarily by the unfamiliar room. Jin's guest bedroom was cast in shadows, moonlight filtering through half-drawn curtains. The phone buzzed again. Sarah's name illuminated the screen. "Hello?" His voice was rough with sleep. "Hey." Sarah's voice came through in a hushed tone. "Just wanted to let you know not to worry. I'm at Jin's." Declan sat up slowly, his mind struggling to process her words. "What?" "I had too much to drink after dinner, so I'm crashing at Jin's place. Didn't want you to worry when I didn't come home." The room seemed to tilt slightly as the reality of her lie registered. Jin was asleep down the hall. Her spare room key was on the dresser where she'd left it for him. The sheets beneath him were cool and crisp, Jin's guest sheets, not Sarah's sister's. "You're at Jin's," he repeated, the statement hanging between them like glass about to shatter. "Yeah," Sarah continued, oblivious to the impossibility of her claim. "We were talking, and it got late, so I'm just going to sleep here and come home in the morning." Declan's gaze fixed on a framed photo across the room. Jin and him at a baseball game last summer, Sarah having backed out at the last minute for work reasons. His hand tightened around the phone. "That's considerate of you," he managed, his voice steady despite the thundering in his chest. "Anyway, don't wait up. I'll see you tomorrow." Her tone was light, casual, the voice of someone who had told this kind of lie before and expected it to be believed. "Sleep well," Declan said, the words feeling foreign in his mouth. The call ended. Declan sat motionless in the dark, the phone still pressed to his ear, listening to nothing. The revelation wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no confrontation. Just a simple, undeniable lie laid bare by coincidence. She didn't know he was at Jin's. She couldn't know. And in not knowing, she had finally given him the one thing he hadn't wanted, but desperately needed. Incontrovertible truth. Declan found himself standing in Jin's kitchen, staring out the window at the quiet neighborhood. The digital clock on the microwave read 3:42 a.m. He couldn't remember walking down the stairs. "Declan?" Jin's voice came from behind him, gentle with concern. "What's wrong?" He turned to find her in the doorway, hair tousled from sleep, oversized sweatshirt pulled over pajama pants. "Sarah just called." "At this hour? Is everything okay?" "She wanted to let me know she's staying at your place tonight." The words felt absurd leaving his mouth, like recounting a strange dream. Jin's expression shifted from confusion to shock as understanding dawned. "She said what?" "That she's here." "With you?" His voice remained eerily calm. "That she had too much to drink and decided to crash at her sister's." "That's—" Jin seemed to search for an appropriate word and failed. "Declan, I'm so sorry." He nodded, the gesture mechanical. "I've suspected something was wrong for months. Part of me hoped I was being paranoid." Jin moved to the kitchen counter, her movements deliberate. "Do you want tea or something stronger?" "Nothing, thank you." He turned back to the window where the faintest hint of pre-dawn light was beginning to soften the horizon. "It's not just tonight. It's a pattern that's been building. The secretiveness, the dismissals, the absences." "What are you going to do?" Jin asked, her voice quiet but direct. The question hung in the air between them. Outside, a newspaper delivery car moved slowly down the street, the driver's silhouette visible for a moment before passing. In that ordinary moment, clarity washed over Declan like a wave. "I'm going home," he said, the decision solidifying as he spoke it. "I'll be there when she arrives in the morning with whatever story she's prepared, and I'll finally have the conversation we should have had months ago." "Do you want me to come with you?" Jin offered. "For support or as a witness?" Declan shook his head. "This is between Sarah and me. It always has been." "She'll deny it," Jin warned. "She'll have some explanation." "Probably," he agreed. "But it won't matter. Some lines, once crossed, can't be uncrossed. Some truths, once seen, can't be unseen." He reached for his jacket hanging by the door, movements deliberate and unhurried. There was no rush now. The uncertainty that had plagued him for months had vanished, replaced by a strange, calm certainty. "Declan," Jin called as he reached for the door, "whatever happens, you deserve better than lies." He nodded, the simple truth of her words resonating within him. "I know. And that's why I have to go." As he stepped into the pre-dawn darkness, the weight of months of doubt lifted from his shoulders. The path ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in a long while, it was clear. Declan unlocked the front door of his home at 6:42 a.m., the familiar space suddenly foreign through the lens of certainty. Morning light filtered through the windows, casting long shadows across the living room where he and Sarah had built 12 years of life together. The coffee table still held her magazine, casually open. Her slippers remained by the couch, expectantly empty. He moved through the rooms with deliberate calm, seeing everything with new clarity. The framed vacation photos that now seemed like artifacts from another life. The shared calendar on the refrigerator with its web of overlapping schedules, the subtle evidence of her absence, a half-empty wine glass by the sink, her phone charger missing from its usual place. In their bedroom, he straightened the comforter and sat on the edge of the bed, hands resting on his knees. For months, he had been reactive, responding to her excuses, accepting her dismissals, adjusting to her absences. Now, in the quiet of the morning, he felt a shift within himself, a transition from the man who had waited for explanations to the man who would demand truth. Declan showered and dressed in clean clothes, each ordinary action weighted with purpose. He prepared coffee, but didn't drink it. The mug sat untouched on the kitchen counter as he positioned himself in the living room armchair, not hovering anxiously by the door, not hiding in another room, but centrally placed in their shared space. The minutes ticked by on the wall clock, each one strengthening his resolve rather than weakening it. No more making excuses for her behavior, no more ignoring the pattern that had been growing clearer with each deception. No more compromising his dignity for the comfort of false peace. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway arrived at 9:17 a.m. Keys jingled in the lock. Declan didn't rise from his chair, didn't call out a greeting. He simply waited, his breathing steady, for the confrontation that would finally bring truth into the open air between them. Sarah entered with the practiced casualness of someone expecting no resistance. Her purse dropped onto the side table, keys jingling as they landed beside it. When she turned and saw Declan sitting in the living room, she paused briefly before her face arranged itself into a smile. "Morning," she said. "I thought you'd still be asleep." "Where were you last night?" Declan's voice was calm, direct. Her expression shifted, a subtle recalibration. "I told you. I stayed at Gin's." "No, you didn't." "What do you mean?" A slight edge entered her tone. "I called you, remember?" "I remember exactly what you said," Declan replied, meeting her gaze steadily. "You told me you were at Gin's house." "Yes, because I was." "That's interesting," he said, the words precise and measured. "Considering I was the one at Gin's house last night, in her guest room, when you called me at 3 in the morning. The color drained from Sarah's face. For a moment, genuine shock replaced the practiced composure. "You were... Where were you, Sarah?" She took a step back, her hand finding the wall for support. I can explain." "I'm sure you can," Declan said. "You've gotten very good at explanations, but they're not the truth, are they?" "This isn't what you think." Her voice hardened with defensive anger. "You're making assumptions. I'm not assuming anything. I'm stating a fact. You told me you were somewhere you weren't." "Fine." She crossed her arms. "I wasn't at Gin's. I was with friends." "I didn't want you to worry." "Which friends? Does it matter? You're clearly determined to make this into something it's not." Declan shook his head. "This pattern didn't start last night. It's been building for months. The secretive behavior, the dismissive comments, the constant prioritizing of everything and everyone but our marriage. So I've been busy with work. That's hardly a crime." "This isn't about being busy, Sarah. It's about deception. It's about respect." He held her gaze. "Last night you looked me in the eye, figuratively, and lied. Not for the first time, I suspect." "One lie doesn't erase 12 years, she said, her tone softening strategically. "Everyone makes mistakes." "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or saying something hurtful in anger," Declan replied. "This was a deliberate choice, just like closing your laptop every time I walk into a room, just like missing my birthday dinner. Just like humiliating me in front of your colleagues. You're overreacting." "No," he interrupted, his voice firm but controlled. "I'm finally seeing clearly." A heavy silence filled the room as they faced each other, the truth finally suspended in the air between them. Sarah's expression cycled through shock, anger, and finally calculation as she assessed this unexpected challenge. "Okay," she said, adopting a conciliatory tone. "I should have been honest about where I was. That was wrong. But we can work through this. Whatever issues we're having, couples go through rough patches all the time." Declan studied her face, the practiced sincerity, the careful positioning of her words. He had seen this performance before, the strategic de-escalation without genuine acknowledgement. "Where were you last night?" he asked again. Her shoulders tensed. "I just told you, with friends." "Which friends? Why does that matter now?" "The point is, it matters because it's the truth," Declan said, rising from his chair. "And without truth, we have nothing." He moved past her toward the bedroom, his decision crystallizing with each step. Sarah followed, her composure beginning to crack as she realized the usual tactics weren't working. "What are you doing?" she asked as he pulled a suitcase from the closet and placed it on the bed. "What I should have done months ago." He opened her dresser drawer and began transferring clothes into the suitcase, his movements methodical and deliberate. "You're packing my things?" Disbelief edged her voice. "Over one misunderstanding?" "This isn't about one night," Declan said, continuing his task without pausing. "It's about a pattern of deception and disrespect that I've been ignoring for too long." "So you're what? Throwing me out? Ending our marriage because I didn't come home one night?" Her tone shifted between incredulity and anger. "This is ridiculous, Declan." "You're overreacting." He stopped and faced her directly. "I'm not ending our marriage because you didn't come home. I'm ending it because you've already left in every way that matters. The trust is gone. The respect is gone. What's left isn't a marriage worth saving." "You don't mean that." Her voice softened, a final attempt at manipulation. "We can fix this. Go to counseling. Take some time." Declan closed the suitcase, the soft click of the latch punctuating his decision. "I'll have the rest of your things packed by the end of the week. You can stay with whoever you were with last night until you find something permanent." "Declan." "I deserve better than lies," he said, echoing Jin's words from hours earlier. "And so do you, if you ever decide to be honest with yourself." He handed her the suitcase, not with anger, but with the quiet dignity of someone who had finally found his limit. In that moment, despite the pain of ending what had once been beautiful, Declan felt the first stirrings of something he hadn't expected: relief. The afternoon light slanted through the bedroom windows as Declan methodically folded Sarah's sweaters and placed them in neat stacks inside the largest suitcase. He had been at it for hours, working his way through her closet with quiet determination. 3 boxes stood labeled by the door: clothes, personal, office, their cardboard boundaries delineating the dismantling of a shared life. He paused at a blue cashmere sweater he'd given her for Christmas 2 years ago, his fingers lingering on the soft fabric. For a moment, doubt flickered. 12 years of marriage reduced to labeled boxes and suitcases. Was he being too harsh? Too absolute? The sound of the front door opening interrupted his thoughts. Sarah had returned after her initial shocked departure, just as he had expected. "You're really going through with this?" she said from the doorway, her voice a careful blend of disbelief and accusation. Declan continued folding, adding the blue sweater to the stack. "Yes. Don't you think you're overreacting?" She moved into the room, perching on the edge of the bed. "I made a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes. This isn't about one mistake." His hands remained steady, despite the tightness in his chest. "It's about a pattern of deception that's been building for months." Sarah's approach shifted, her voice softening. "We can work through this, Declan. Couples therapy. A weekend away to reconnect. We have too much history to throw everything away." He met her gaze directly. "History isn't enough when there's no trust." "So that's it? 12 years and you won't even try?" Anger edged into her tone. "I have been trying," Declan replied, closing the suitcase with a quiet click. "I've been trying every time I overlooked a suspicious text, every time I accepted a flimsy excuse, every time I gave you the benefit of the doubt. I'm done trying. This is ridiculous." She stood, pacing the room. "Where am I supposed to go?" "That's not my concern anymore." He lifted the suitcase from the bed, setting it beside the boxes. "I've packed essentials for now. I'll have the rest ready by Friday." Sarah's tactical shifts continued, from anger to tears, from accusations to apologies, from threats to promises of change. Through it all, Declan maintained his resolve, continuing the necessary task of separation until the essential packing was complete. "She's been calling me non-stop," Jin said, sliding a mug of coffee across the kitchen counter to Declan. 3 days had passed since the confrontation, and they sat in the morning light of Jin's kitchen. "Keeps asking if I've talked to you, what you've said." "What have you told her?" Declan asked, warming his hands around the mug. "That she should talk to you directly." Jin's directness, so different from her sister's calculated communications, had always been refreshing. "Mom called too. Wanted to know what's going on." "And?" "I told her to ask Sarah." She hesitated. "Though I did say you had good reasons for your decision." Declan nodded gratefully. Family loyalties in divorce could be complicated, but Jin had always valued truth over blood ties. Later that afternoon, Declan met his friend Marcus for lunch at a quiet cafe downtown. The conversation eventually turned to the separation, as Declan knew it would. "Honestly, I'm surprised it took this long," Marcus said, his bluntness softened by genuine concern. "You've seemed diminished these past few months, like you were slowly disappearing." "I didn't realize it was that obvious," Declan replied. "To someone who's known you 20 years, yeah, it was obvious." Marcus leaned forward. "The question is, what now?" "Legal consultation tomorrow. Then, I don't know. Rebuild, I guess." Not all reactions were as supportive. That evening, a call from Sarah's friend Melissa was filled with thinly veiled accusations. "She's devastated, you know," Melissa said without preamble. "I hope you're satisfied." "I'm not looking for satisfaction," Declan replied evenly. "Just clarity." "She made one mistake." "I appreciate your loyalty to Sarah," he interrupted. "But you don't have all the information." After ending the call, Declan sat on his living room couch, the house unnaturally quiet in Sarah's absence. The day's conversations replayed in his mind. The range of reactions, judgments, and assumptions from people who could never fully understand what had transpired between him and Sarah. His phone buzzed with a text from his colleague David. "Heard what happened. If you need anything, legal advice, moving help, or just a drink, I'm here." The simple message cut through the noise of the day's more complicated interactions. Some relationships would become casualties of the separation. Others, unexpectedly, might grow stronger. The realization settled in him as he typed a reply. Legal consultation tomorrow. Could use a sounding board after. The law office of Patricia Winters occupied the 15th floor of a downtown building, its reception area designed to convey both professionalism and calm. Leather chairs, subtle lighting, and abstract art created an atmosphere that acknowledged the emotional turbulence of clients while promising orderly resolution. "Mr. Hamilton," the receptionist's voice was practiced and gentle. "Ms. Winters is ready for you." Declan followed her through double doors into a corner office where a woman in her 50s rose from behind a substantial desk. Patricia Winters had come highly recommended by David, experienced in divorce law but known for favoring equitable settlements over scorched earth litigation. "Please have a seat," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. "I understand you're considering divorce proceedings." "Yes." The word felt strange in the formal setting, transforming his personal decision into a legal reality. "Before we begin," Patricia said, settling back into her chair, "I want to clarify my approach. I believe in fair resolutions that allow both parties to move forward with dignity. If you're looking for someone to destroy your spouse financially or emotionally, I'm not that attorney." "That's not what I want," Declan assured her. "I just want a clean break with fair division of assets." She nodded, opening a leather portfolio. "Good. Now tell me about your situation." For the next 40 minutes, Declan outlined the marriage's deterioration, the pattern of deception, and his decision to end it. Patricia took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but otherwise allowing him to tell his story without interruption. "Based on what you've described," she said when he finished, "we have grounds for a no-fault divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. You've been married 12 years, no children, both employed, and the house was purchased jointly after marriage. Relatively straightforward from a legal perspective." She explained the process: filing the petition, financial disclosures, negotiating the settlement agreement, the court appearance that would finalize everything. Each step transformed the emotional reality of his marriage's end into procedural milestones. "Do you have any questions?" she asked finally. "How long will it take?" "If uncontested and both parties are cooperative, 4 to 6 months. And if contested," she left the time frame open. When it came time to sign the initial paperwork, Declan felt a moment of gravity as his pen hovered over the signature line. The document before him would formally initiate the end of his marriage. 12 years reduced to legal terminology and case numbers. He signed with steady hands, the ink marking not just the paper, but a boundary between his past and future. As Patricia's assistant notarized the documents, Declan felt a curious sense of lightness mingled with solemnity. "We'll file these today," Patricia said, accepting the papers from her assistant. "The court will serve your wife with copies within 10 business days. After that, the legal timeline begins." Declan nodded, standing to shake her hand. "Thank you." As he left the building and stepped into the afternoon sunlight, the weight of the morning's proceedings settled around him. The divorce wasn't yet final, wouldn't be for months, but something definitive had shifted. In transforming his private decision into public record, he had drawn a line that could not be easily erased. For the first time since discovering Sarah's deception, Declan felt not just resolved, but vindicated in his choice. The path ahead remained difficult, but it was now officially underway. 2 weeks after filing the divorce papers, Declan met Jen from Sarah's office for coffee. The meeting had been her suggestion, delivered through a hesitant text message that had surprised him. They'd only spoken briefly at the company barbecue, but something in her demeanor that day had registered, a quiet kindness during Sarah's public dismissal of his work. The cafe was busy with mid-morning customers, providing both background noise and privacy. Jen arrived precisely on time, her professional demeanor softened by genuine concern. "Thank you for meeting me," she said after they'd ordered. "I wasn't sure if you would." "I wasn't sure either," Declan admitted. "But something told me I should." Jen's fingers fidgeted with her napkin. This is awkward, but I felt you should know. Sarah's been telling people at work that you left her without warning, that you refused counseling, that it came out of nowhere. Declan nodded, unsurprised. Controlling the narrative. There's more. Jen hesitated, her discomfort visible. For several months, Sarah's been involved with someone from the client side. Marcus. The name registered immediately. The bearded department head who had greeted Declan so warmly at the barbecue. The man who had claimed Sarah mentions you all the time. I suspected something, Declan said quietly. I didn't know who. It started around February, as far as I can tell. Office rumors at first, but then more obvious. Late meetings, business trips that coincided. Jen looked up, her expression earnest. I don't usually involve myself in other people's relationships, but the way she's talking about you, making you the villain when… She trailed off. When she was the one being unfaithful, Declan finished. Yes. Jen's voice softened. I just thought you deserved to know you weren't imagining things. The secrecy, the deception, it was real. A strange calm settled over Declan as the final pieces clicked into place. The timeline matched perfectly. Sarah's changing behavior, her increased absences, her digital secrecy. The revelation didn't bring pain so much as confirmation, like the final turn of a key in a lock he'd been struggling to open. Thank you for telling me, he said finally. Not for ammunition or revenge, but for clarity. I understand, Jen said, and he believed she did. Sometimes just knowing you weren't crazy is the most important thing. You could destroy her at work, David said, leaning against the railing of the riverside walkway where they'd met for an evening stroll. One email to HR about an inappropriate relationship with a client, policy violation at minimum. The setting sun cast long shadows across the water, the city skyline beginning to twinkle with early lights. Declan had shared Jen's revelation with his friend, needing to process the information with someone he trusted. I could, Declan acknowledged, watching a family of ducks navigate the current below. But what would that accomplish? Justice? David suggested. Consequences for actions. She's spending your divorce spinning lies about you. Declan considered this, feeling the pull of righteous anger, the temptation to ensure Sarah faced public consequences for her private betrayals. It would be easy. One conversation with her company's HR department. A few carefully worded statements to mutual friends. The truth had power. When I was a kid, Declan said after a moment, my grandfather told me something I've never forgotten. He said, the measure of a person isn't how they treat those who've been good to them, but how they handle those who've done them wrong. David was quiet, waiting for him to continue. I don't want vengeance to be part of my story, Declan continued. Not because Sarah deserves protection, but because I don't want that weight on me moving forward. That's remarkably evolved, David said, genuine respect in his voice. I'm not sure I could be so philosophical. It's not philosophy, it's survival, Declan replied. Carrying anger is exhausting. I spent months in that gray area of suspicion and doubt. Now I have clarity. That's enough. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, the evening air cooling around them. Ahead, the path curved toward a small plaza with benches overlooking the water. So what will you do with this information? David finally asked. Nothing, Declan said, surprising himself with how right the answer felt. The divorce is proceeding. My life is moving forward. Sarah's choices are her own to live with. And if she continues spreading her version of events, Declan stopped, turning to face his friend directly. Then people who truly know me will recognize the inconsistency, and those who don't, he shrugged. Their opinions aren't my burden to carry anymore. In the gathering twilight, Declan felt something shift within him. Not forgiveness exactly, but a release. The knowledge of Sarah's affair wasn't a weapon to wield, but a confirmation that his instincts had been right all along. That alone was victory enough. The apartment was smaller than the house, but the sunlight through the east-facing windows transformed the space each morning. Declan stood in the empty living room, measuring tape in hand, planning furniture placements in this place that was entirely his own. 1 month had passed since filing the divorce papers. The house was on the market, most possessions divided, the legal process proceeding with surprising smoothness now that both parties had accepted its inevitability. "Perfect spot for your grandfather's desk," Jin said, stepping through the doorway with a box labeled "Kitchen" in her arms. She had insisted on helping with the move, recruiting her boyfriend and 2 of Declan's colleagues to form an efficient moving team. "I was thinking the same thing," Declan replied, "by the window facing out toward the view." "Starting your new life with a view," she approved. "Very symbolic." As the afternoon progressed, the empty apartment gradually transformed, furniture arranged, kitchen unpacked, books lined on shelves. Not just a place to stay, but a home taking shape. When the others left for a pizza run, Declan found himself alone in the space for the first time. He moved from room to room, seeing not what was missing from his previous life, but what was possible in this new beginning. His phone chimed with a text from Patricia Winters. "Settlement agreement received from opposing counsel. Reasonable terms as discussed. Review at your convenience." Another step forward in the process of formal separation. He sent a brief acknowledgement, then returned to the task of arranging his books, the familiar spines creating continuity between past and future. The doorbell rang, and he opened it to find David holding a wrapped housewarming gift. "Sorry I couldn't help with the heavy lifting," he said, handing over the package. "Deadline day at the office." "You're here now," Declan replied, unwrapping the gift to reveal a framed architectural print, a beautifully detailed rendering of the Hartman Theater he had restored. "Thought you should have something on your walls that reminds you of your actual talents," David explained, not the version Sarah dismissed. Declan studied the print, appreciating both the gesture and the reminder. "Thank you. It's perfect." As evening settled and his friends gathered in the new space, Declan observed the easy conversation, the genuine warmth, the absence of the tension that had permeated his home in recent months. This wasn't just a new apartment, but a new chapter, one where truth was the foundation rather than suspicion, where relationships were built on mutual respect rather than manipulation. The revelation of Sarah's affair had been the final piece of a puzzle he'd been struggling to solve. Now, with that clarity, he could see the pattern that had been developing all along, not just in her behavior, but in his own growth through adversity. The painful ending had become, unexpectedly, a pathway to something genuine and new. 1 year after the 3 a.m. call that changed everything, Declan stood on his apartment balcony watching the sunrise. The early light transformed the city skyline, painting familiar structures in new colors, much like time had recast his own experience. The divorce had been finalized 6 months ago, the legal conclusion to a marriage that had ended long before papers were filed. The process, once so daunting, now existed as a chapter completed rather than a wound still healing. In the quiet moments of reflection, Declan had come to understand that trust wasn't naive belief, but conscious choice, requiring both faith and verification. Sarah's deception had revealed this truth painfully, yet the lesson served him now in healthier relationships, with friends, family, and eventually, perhaps, in love again. What had surprised him most wasn't the betrayal itself, but his own response to it, the discovery of an inner strength he hadn't known he possessed. The dignity he'd maintained hadn't come from denying pain, but from refusing to let it diminish him. He had chosen boundaries over bitterness, truth over vengeance. The community that emerged around him during his darkest moments, Jin's straightforward support, David's steady presence, even Jen's courageous honesty, proved that connection survived crisis, often growing stronger through it. These relationships, built on mutual respect and authenticity, formed the foundation of his renewed life. Below his balcony, the city was awakening, people beginning their day, unaware of others' private struggles and triumphs. How many were silently questioning patterns in their own relationships? How many were gathering courage to face uncomfortable truths? What Declan now carried forward wasn't the weight of betrayal, but the wisdom it had yielded. That self-respect formed the foundation of all healthy connections, that patterns revealed more than words ever could, and that even the most painful endings contained within them the seeds of new beginnings. The sun cleared the horizon, illuminating the path ahead, unknown but no longer frightening.